Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I am John Schaefer, and today we are talking about Wookiee Warriors. So it's a new kit that's we just announced today. We've kind of previewed it during our mini extravaganza back in March, but now is the time when we actually get to delve into a lot of specifics about the kit. I'm going to go over a lot of the details and what the kit comes with, show off the frame, show off the miniatures, talk about some of the options in there, and then I'm going to use some of the older Wookiee Warriors, the previous edition of those, and using some of the extra parts that I had left over from assembly to update some of those and diversify my overall force for when I create a Wookiee Warrior-based Republic force later on this year. So I think I will switch over to this cam so we can get the focus on the miniatures themselves, and we'll dig right into it. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me adjust this light here so everybody can see these a little bit better. So we've got the kit can be built in a lot of different ways. I'm going to cover a lot of the different options available to us all. The previous version of the Wookiee Warriors just had Reich blades and pistols, but now in this kit you have the option to create miniatures with X1 carbines, like these fellows right here, which gives them a ranged option for the Wookiees. Which really kind of diversifies what their battlefield role is going to be and how you can play with them. So in addition to these basic 6 miniatures, 3 of which I've assembled with melee weapons and 3 with X1 carbines, you could also, if you so chose, assemble your miniatures with some of these heavy upgrades, like this Wookiee with a battle shield. Very cool. And I'll take a little bit of time to kind of show these off in the round so everybody can kind of get an appreciation for what the scopes look like. The new upgrade that we haven't talked about yet is the Wookiee long gun, which is a long-range kind of sniper equivalent for the Wookiees, which kind of adds to their options available to them. You can also assemble your miniatures with a bowcaster, which is a previous edition that we had as well. But you can also take this particular Wookiee and assemble them as a new option available. So let's kind of go over the cards here real quick and kind of talk about those. So this is the new Wookiee Warriors variant with the X1 carbines. So they've got a range of 1 to 3. They throw out 2 white dice. They surge on attack, which is pretty good. And like all Wookiees, as per the errata that was issued previously, they have all gained the scale keyword, so they can easily kind of clamber and climb over terrain very well. They still have the same old Indomitable keyword that they had before, which helps them kind of mitigate their suppression. And they also, this version also has Sharpshooter 1, which is very advantageous when trying to get attacks through cover. So this is the Republic version of the unit card. The Rebel version is exactly the same. It's the same points cost and everything, 72 points. But the one that I want to talk about that maybe some astute viewers have noticed looking at the description on the Asmodee web store is this one, which is a Wookiee chieftain option that you have in the kit as well. So this opens up a new commander option for the Republic. He is very, very cool. He's got a lot of really awesome stuff. And next week he even comes with his own set of command cards, which are pretty great. I don't want to spoil them yet. Next week we're going to get into that stuff a little bit more in detail. But let's talk about this guy here in a little bit more detail. So he's got Agile 1. So whenever he makes a standard move action, he gets a dodge token, and he has charge, so that couples pretty well with that. In addition, he has a keyword called Duelist, which helps him kind of handle force users on the enemy side, should he encounter them. You can spend those dodge tokens to gain Pierce 1 on his attacks, or can gain Immune Pierce, which is definitely very useful against certain opposing characters and other units. Also has Indomitable. He's equipped with a bowcaster, throws out 4 black dice up to range 3, which is pretty amazing. And then if you are so unfortunate to get into melee with this beast, he's going to throw 6 dice in all 3 colors at you. So it's pretty potent option, pretty awesome in general. I really think this is going to open up a lot of opportunities for people to make really heavily themed Wookiee forces with their own chieftain miniature available to them. You can assemble and utilize this miniature should you so choose for your chieftain if you like, or use them as a bowcaster, or if you wanted to, you could spend a little bit extra time and actually convert one up, which I'm going to show off a little bit here in a moment. So let's take a little bit more time and just take a look at these miniatures real quick. Let me take a look at the chat and see if there's anything in particular that's that people might have some general questions about. Yeah, if you can just get Wookiee core troops, you can go 100% Wookiee. That would be pretty awesome. I don't know exactly what the devs have planned in terms of making it a complete Wookiee force. I know that they've certainly talked about it in the past, so probably more information about that in the future, I imagine. So yeah, let's take a look at some of these miniatures just to kind of show them off really quick before I kind of go into the next portion of this live stream, which is going to be taking the older Wookiee warriors and using some of my extra parts to kind of convert them over, just to give me a little bit more diversity in my Wookiee heavy force that I am planning. So I just love the pose. This guy's kind of got that Heisman run going on, like the Heisman Trophy, but kind of looking off to the side, just really action packed. A lot of variety and how they're all set up. This is the unit leader for the melee based Wookiees here. It's got a really cool kind of shield on the back of the arm. Very cool pose, and he's got a pistol there in his hand as well. And then probably my favorite of the Wookiee base is this one. That pose is just so awesome. He's just like lunging forward and just really putting out a challenge to the enemies. And another notable bit is that the frames come with a lot of extra little bits that you can add to kind of customize the Wookiees, like these little pistols that they have on their hips. Very cool. So let's take a look at the frames, and we can kind of talk about how all that stuff is set up here. So the product comes with 2 different kinds of frames and 2 copies of each of them. So this is kind of like the main frame here. Let me get rid of this overlay here, and we can kind of take a look at some of the parts. You get some extra X1 carbines if you wanted to kind of put those like on somebody's hip or something like that, kind of to change things up a little bit. You have a ton of different head options and different kind of hair configurations with these dreadlocks and these other cool bits. Here's the Wookiee battle shield. You've got little Reich blades that you can put on their back. Tons of different head options, like I mentioned before, and melee weapon options as well. So there's a number of different ways that you can assemble all these miniatures. It's all kind of goes into detail in the rule sheet. But if you want to be creative, you can certainly mix and match and combine these parts in other cool ways. It just might require a little bit of some putty, which I'm going to kind of go over here in a second, just about sculpting fur, etc. And this frame has got some of the other additional options. So this has got the long gun here, which is very cool. We'll be showing off a ton of these upgrade cards and things over the course of next week, along with a lot more information about Yoda, his command cards, a lot of the new upgrades and things that come with it. So make sure to keep your eyes on our social media as we post tons of more card images and other information about these upcoming products. So yeah, there we go. So that's more or less the parts that you get. There's just a ton of different options, lots of different configurations you can and ways that you can assemble these. One thing of note is that the existing Wookiee Warriors SKU that came out, I think that is SWL 25, that is going to be replaced by this one. Like, we still have that product in stock now, but we will not reprint it. So if you really want to make sure that you have, you know, as much of a diversity, as much diversity as possible in your Wookiee-based force, you might want to consider picking up a box of those. They're going to work perfectly well with the new updated rules and function perfectly with all that. But they just give you some more options in how the miniatures look. And I've got some of those here. You can see that they are all in a very comparable scale. They're all sized very similarly, and how they are set up. This is the old version, and this would be one of the new ones. And I've got, you know, these 4 that have kind of been set aside here that I'm gonna work on, and I'm gonna take some of the extra X1 carbines that I had and combine them with these miniatures to make another unit of X1 Wookiees for my forces. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about just conversions in general, and, you know, working with this stuff. You know, a lot of people that have been working with these kind of materials and been in the hobby for a very long time are very familiar with these general techniques and these general tools. But just for the sake of any new viewers, new hobbyists that are on the stream today, I just kind of wanted to just talk about these things kind of in general terms. So because we are using these older Wookiees, they are made with a different kind of plastic than the newer ones. As such, these Wookiees will not actually work with plastic glue. You have to use a super glue for them. So all the conversions that I'm going to be doing today with these older Wookiees are going to be requiring some super glue for the conversions as we have them set up. In terms of tools, I've got a pair of clippers, just a standard pair of hobby clippers. Most hobbies are going to have these because they use them to remove components from the frames. You can kind of clip all those things off there. I've got myself a hobby knife, just a standard X-Acto blade. I've got some sculpting tools. I like these ones that have kind of like a bladed end on this side and something kind of flat on this side. These are going to be very handy for sculpting fur and filling in any sort of gaps or anything that we have. And to fill in those sort of gaps, I'm using green stuff, which comes in two parts. It's you got a yellow part and a green part. You mix them together in equal proportions, and it will harden over the course of a few hours and completely cure over 24 hours. But it'll give you a little bit of working time so you can sculpt in and modify and fill in gaps as you see fit. I've also got a pin vise. This is used to drill holes into the miniature, and then I can use paper clips to actually create armatures for some sculpting. So there might be some of the conversions here that actually I need to create kind of like a bone, so to speak, I suppose, or just kind of like an armature to sculpt on top of. So I might be utilizing that. We'll kind of see how this all pans out. And I got some paper clips, as I mentioned before, for those pins, some super glue, which everyone should be familiar with, a little bit of super glue accelerator in case things take a little while to cure. So that largely covers the materials that I'll be using and the tools that I'll be using today. So let's go ahead and start to figure out exactly how we want to pose and how we want to adjust these Wookiees. So this one in particular, I think, is a unit leader. I like his arm up in the air like that, and I think the easiest place to start with that would be to use the one outstretched X1 carbine arm that I already have from the other Wookiee warriors, and that fits here pretty well. Like it's not going to require a whole lot of modification to actually fit on there. It's probably a little bit of trimming on this underside to fit in there flush against up against the torso. So I'm thinking I'm going to use that one there to create a pose similar to that, as you can kind of envision how that Wookiee is going to look. In addition to that, I've got the regular bowcaster Wookiee. This arm is separate. He normally carries a bowcaster in his arms. But I think in this case, I'm going to utilize a pair of the X1 carbine arms here. I'm going to cut off the hand right here and sub it out with this one, and then fill in the gap here, and then use the secondary arm here to give a Wookiee holding an X1 carbine at the ready to blast somebody. And these two I haven't decided yet. So I've got a number of excess parts. This kind of shows you in general all the different options and things that I could potentially use. What am I going to do? I'm not sure, but I need to do at least one other miniature with an X1 carbine to make a full squad. So one of these fellows is going to have an X1 carbine. And the last one, maybe I'll do a long gun. Maybe I'll do a battle shield. Maybe I'll do a bowcaster. I'll leave it up to chat. I'll let you all decide what the last one is going to be. So let's go ahead and get started here. So I've got myself my X-Acto blade. I'm going to go ahead and grab a fresh blade on this one just to make sure that I can cut really cleanly here. So I'm going to grab that one sec. All right, and we're back. I think it's always a good idea to use a nice sharp X-Acto blade when you are trimming or working on these kind of conversions. Though it might seem like it might be more dangerous potentially, it's usually just going to make cutting these things a lot easier. You're not going to have to put excess stress or strain on any sort of your cuts. As always, you always just want to kind of cut away from yourself as you go about it. So I'm just going to trim off a little bit of this excess flash that we have here. I did not really clean these up very much before I got started, but I'm just going to tidy that up just a little bit on the back. And then I'm going to test fit this component here on the arm. Looking at it, that looks a little bit too far out. So I'm going to trim that down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and shave this down here. Trim this down on the bottom here. Let's see how this is going to fit in general. Yeah, that fits pretty well. I see a little spot up here on the top where I probably need to trim the top of this just to get it to fit. So that's usually how these conversions go. It's a lot of test fitting, going back and whittling the parts down a little bit to get them to fit just right. So just taking off a little bit of the top part of that upper arm so it can fit in there flush up against that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm going to glue that in place, and while that's drying, I'll move on to the next one, and then I can come back after this glue is dried a little bit, and I can start to apply a little bit of green stuff to fill in the gaps that we might have. So conversions and kit bashing are certainly something that you know, a number of people in the community are all about. I think, you know, if you're really just trying to make your force unique and kind of diverse, there's just so many different options, different ways you can go to kind of customize and personalize your forces, should you so see fit. And it's just kind of taking and combining different parts together to make something really unique and really cool. So yeah, I think that's looking pretty great. There is a pretty substantial gap there in the back. I think I might have trimmed it down just a little bit too much to get it to fit, but the overall profile looks good, and that's going to be a real easy fix with a little bit of green stuff. On the back of his arm there is a small little shield bit that goes on the back of the unit leader's forearm. And I think it's one of these two right here. Let's go ahead and clip that off. Yeah, thank you for the synopsis there, Hurricane Girl. That is very accurate, what you have stated. Yeah, aren't these little bits super cool? I love these like the cool designs they have on them. Just has that really awesome Wookiee aesthetic. I think that, you know, the sculpting team spent a lot of time looking at references and resources from LFL to get this stuff to be really accurate and really, really detailed and very, very cool. So that's just going to go on the back of the arm right there. So I could use plastic glue because both of these parts are plastic, but I've got the super glue here out, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Super glue, as a reminder, works on both hard plastic and the softer plastic that we released in the early days of Legion. So if you are on the fence about an adhesive to use, super glue will work for you in all cases. All right, so that is one new unit leader largely started. So let's take a look at this one. So this one has got a hand that I'm going to have to lop off. So I'm going to start off there. So I'm going to cut this off at the wrist, although it has like a little bit of the X1 carbine all the way back there. So I'm just going to cut it off right behind that X1 carbine hilt, I guess. It's kind of like a strange little extension off of the back there, but I want to keep that detail just in case you can see it underneath. But I am going to clip this off just to make a nice flat join here. So I'm going to use clippers there because it's a lot easier than trying to saw through something like this with an X-Acto blade. And then I can use the X-Acto blade to kind of trim up and flatten that out into a nice flat surface. While I'm at it, I'm just going to go ahead and clean up a little bit of the areas where I clipped this off of the frame, just to tidy it up just a little bit. And this is kind of my favorite way of cleaning mold lines, is just this kind of like reverse scrape. I kind of tilt the X-Acto blade away from myself and just kind of scrape back towards myself, making sure to keep the blade away from my fingers as much as I can. And then just, you know, with a lot of practice, it's pretty quick and easy to use. Okay, so looking at that, and then looking at the length of the arm, that means that I'm gonna have to cut this arm back so it fits about there. But I think to help me inform my decision, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the other arm. And sometimes what's you know, those kind of 3-point connections where you've got like an arm and another arm that then connects to a weapon can be kind of tricky because they have to be very specifically aligned to fit in there just right. So I think what I'm going to do in this case is I'm actually going to use both of these parts are plastic glue, and I'm going to kind of utilize the advantages of using plastic glue here to create a bond that's still a little bit workable. I can kind of tweak it and move it just a little bit should I so see fit. So I'm going to use a little bit of this this brush on plastic glue that I have here. Go ahead and brush on a little bit here on this connection point where the hand meets the other arm. And just get that kind of locked in there and drying a little bit. Now it's going to be flexible enough that I can make some adjustments to it afterwards, but this is going to help make sure that I'm going to keep the other arm aligned, and it's going to help inform how far back I need to cut that other arm to get these parts to fit together. I'm just going to hold that for a second and just kind of let the glue set up. Plastic glue works by, melting the two surfaces together through a chemical reaction. It takes just a little bit of time to set up, so we'll let that kind of sit there. And now we can start to see how this is all going to go in. So it's going to fit in like that and kind of cover up the other part. So I'm going to have to cut off at about where this little bit of fur comes down, right about at that point. There's also like a small little bit of the stock from the bowcaster right there. So I'm going to also try to carve that out. So I've not attached this arm, this upper arm portion. I just kind of like push fit it in there just to kind of see and make sure that I can get it to fit all right. I think I'm going to now go back in and kind of make some adjustments to this. So this part I'm going to trim down just a little bit. And this is a small part, so I'm going to try to be, as careful as I can and just cut off in like little small bits and just whittle away at this. You don't really want to go in like really deep and just try to push your way all the way through it. Your hand might slip, you might cut yourself. Nobody wants that. So I'm just going to take this, take this blade, and then I'm just going to kind of scoop out and cut away at that hilt. I'm sorry, not the hilt, but the stock of the bowcaster. And then I can putty all this stuff up and cover up the join. A little bit of fur sculpting, which I will get into here in a second. There, kind of tidy this bit down. Get that to just breast a little bit more flush. So carve out that little bit there. Go a little bit further in on the arm as well too. Cool. All right, and then I kind of, as I mentioned before, let me just double check here to make sure that I got the right point of reference, because you always want to measure once and cut, or measure twice and cut once, not the opposite. Yep, so right where that part comes down, I just need to cut off from there forward. So I will use my clippers again. Flip that off to make a nice flat join. That'll make this really easy to connect. And again, because these are two different kinds of plastic, I'm going to have to use super glue here. Oops. Well, I have broken my join there, so I'm going to go back and push that back together. Yeah, the drying time of plastic glue is advantageous in some ways and a little cumbersome in others. But in general, I think it's like the best way to assemble these miniatures for sure. Just gives you the best overall join once everything dries, and it gives you a little bit of that posability. And when you're doing things like B1 battle droids, for example, which have a lot of little teeny tiny parts, plastic glue won't glue your fingers together, which is very, very frustrating when you're working with very small parts like that. So this is kind of the start of I think a series that we're looking at probably doing more in the future, where we kind of spend some more time on the assembly of miniatures, kind of talking about some of the specific things that maybe won't be quite as apparent in some of the assembly instructions or other sources. And then also just kind of talk about the different options. Like we spent a little bit of time talking about, say, the LAT LE and the AA5, about assembling and putting those together to be able to work with the clear plastic components to make sure that you don't fog or mess those up. And I think that, in general, just, all these hobby streams don't always have to be gameplay or painting oriented. Sometimes we can spend some time on the hobby and assembly side of things too. So if we find that, they are popular options, we'll certainly continue them. But this kit is so full of options and different ways that you can assemble these miniatures. I just want to spend a little bit of time just kind of going over it, and also just showing off the the original Wookiee Warriors and showing how they're compatible with the new ones, and reminding everybody that eventually these older Wookiee Warriors are not going to be available anymore. So scoop them up while you can. Okay. It's looking pretty good. So let's do another test fit here and see how this is doing. Looks like I still have to go back a little bit further on that arm. Looks like I poorly judged it. And such is life of converting miniatures. It's a lot of back and forth and slight adjustments to get the fit that you want. Well, hey, thanks, Gooey Chewy. Appreciate it. Based on your username, I would hope that you are excited about Wookiee Warriors. Okay, so we can get that to line in there a little bit. And then I'm going to utilize that plastic glue just to bend that arm in a little bit. So what I'm doing here is, because I have that kind of like loose connection here, it gives me a little bit of flexibility so I can move and adjust it just to fit in there just right. And it's just going to be a lot easier than trying to guess that as I go. That looks pretty good. He's kind of sighting down the weapon. I think that those things fit in there pretty well. I think a slight trim to the interior of this arm to get that to fit in a little bit better is probably in order, so I'm going to do that. Again, just kind of whittling away at it, just like little chunks. It's just way more controlled. It's way safer. It's going to give you a better overall control of the X-Acto blade. You just got to be a little bit patient with it, just whittle away at these little things. It'll also help you hopefully keep yourself from cutting away too much as you kind of go back and forth and test fit. Yeah, and that fits pretty well now. Awesome, looks good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and commit to some glue here. I'm going to put some super glue on both sides. I'm going to get this thing locked in. I'm going to try not to get any super glue on my fingers as well as I can. No promises. All right, so that fits in there pretty well on the back side. I'm liking how that's looking. Looks pretty good on the front. I definitely have a gap in there that I'm gonna have to fill out with a little bit of Wookiee fur. That is no problem. Cool, so that's 2 down. All right, so we need another with a carbine. So let's take a look at my parts and see what my options are. So we can certainly use one of these empty carbines and just kind of attach it to one of the existing hands. That might be the easiest option, as opposed to trying to get another multi-part connection point. Oh, here you go. So this is our suggestion for the chieftain miniature here. He's got these extra Reich blades on his back. Uses this head in particular as opposed to the other option, which fits this body, which is like that one. So it's kind of your choice, however you want to make them distinct. I kind of am going down this path. I wanted to make like a really dynamic. I'm also thinking about doing multiple Wookiee chieftains in my Wookiee force. So I definitely wanted to have like a little bit more variety. So what I'm currently working on is modifying and changing one of the existing sculpts here. So I took the standard Wookiee leader, which is, I guess it's probably going to be closest. Yeah, I guess it's closest to this one. And I cut him at the, I'm sorry, that's the wrong body. It's this one, I think. Yeah, that's the guy. All right, and what I did is I cut the leg here, and I cut like a triangle section out of it. Oops, you can't even see it. And to get that leg to bend back a little bit more. So when it's standing on a base, it is going to look like going to be kind of like surging forward like this, kind of jumping forward. So that does mean I need to sculpt a Wookiee foot. So that's going to challenge me a little bit. And I probably won't spend the time on that because it's going to take me a little bit of extra time to do that. But I like that one. I like this head quite a bit. So I've kind of taken and modified this this head so it can kind of fit on there a little bit better. And then for the bowcaster arm, I want him to have it like out and like getting ready to blast somebody. So it's going to be kind of out there like that. So what that does mean is I need to kind of fashion an upper arm section up here that'll go up on the top. So if we have the time, we're only about a half an hour in. I might kind of show you a little bit about pinning and making that armature so I can then sculpt on top of it. But that's my general plan for kind of making my own unique Wookiee chieftain, in addition to the one that I'll already have, which is this one right here with this bowcaster. And I think you'll find that the parts are very, very interchangeable with the other components. If you really want to customize and make your own unique Wookiee chieftain, you can certainly do it. Lots of different options for you. Okay, so let's see, what other parts do I have here? So I've got another set of arms here that I could use. It's got a hand attached to the carbine. That means that I'm going to have to actually, again, do a kind of like another 3-point connection, like this fellow. I think that's certainly doable. So which of these two bodies is probably going to look the best like that? This guy looks like he's kind of sighting down the weapon, so I think that's the body to use. So let's try that one. And this is, so it's not a very, premeditated stream. I'm just kind of going about it and doing it live. And you can be here along the way as I kind of make some of these decisions. Now I'm going to be taking a lot of these Wookiees and painting them on a future stream. So if you are curious about Wookiee painting techniques, make sure to check out some streams. I think I'll probably do that next week. Somebody threw out in the chat a while back the idea of Arctic Wookiees, which is very interesting and appealing to me. I could see if you wanted to go with like a Wookiee heavy force with Tauntauns and Rebel veterans and P-Towers and airspeeders and things, like that would be a really cool thematic list with a lot of fur in it potentially, which would be very cool. So maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll go down that route of doing something kind of more Arctic Wookiees. They're from a jungle planet. They would probably not go there very often, but they're my miniatures. I'll do what I want. Okay. All right, so let me see if I can find the correct arm that connects to this bit. I think it is this one. Right here in this lower portion. And I've got tons of extra like heads and hair bits and things like this. I could certainly, utilize those and kind of add them to the existing Wookiees to make them even more unique and pronounced. If I really wanted to get fancy with it, I could lop off some heads and things, but no, I think I'm just going to stick with some weapon swaps today. I was also going to use the latter part of this stream to go over some My Star Wars Legion winners, some of the picks that we had from the month of May, which was themed all around core units. So there's some very, very cool ones in there to talk about. And once I get this thing set up to dry, we'll switch over to that and talk about those. This month is still heavy units, so very, very appropriate with the release of the LAT LE and the AA5 speeder truck, but you can paint any sort of heavy unit you want to. I've already seen some amazing entries, some really cool weathering, really cool paint jobs on a number of different vehicles on Instagram. So if you want to check them out for yourself, you can always use the My Star Wars Legion hashtag and filter like that on Instagram, and it will show you all of your options available. Okay, so looking here, he's going to be like this. I'm going to need to have an upper arm for that. So let's look at the original Wookiee here and see what we got going on here that we could potentially use. I believe that pose uses kind of like the backward facing rake blades, maybe? Maybe it's this part. Nope, that's not the one. The Wookiee chieftain is a Republic upgrade. It is not usable by the rebels. Although I'm sure you could talk your friends into using them if you wanted to. So that is the arm position for this Wookiee normally. It's up very high. I don't know if that's really going to work for what we want to do. I might be able... I like that shoulder pad, though. That thing is really cool. Got like this really cool kind of ornamental shoulder pad bit. So I'm going to keep that. I like that part, and it's going to make the join into the arm a little bit easier. But I am going to clip off the rest. I'm going to go ahead and just use the flush end of my clippers here. Align it so I'm not going to actually cut into the part that I want to keep, which goes down right about there, and I'll just clip off this part. Like so. And then the arm is going to be kind of faced a little bit more downward, so I need to kind of undercut under here a little bit more too. I'm going to cut off down this way a little. This one might be one of the more involved conversions and require the most green stuff, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we've got the shoulder pad now to kind of work with. And I think while it's attached in there, that's a little bit easier to hold on to than anything else. So I'm going to use this while it is already attached and go ahead and trim this down a little bit more. Cut into it a little bit. Any chance we can get one eating a porg? Well, you might have to sculpt that yourself. But a porg, what is that? It's just like a couple little dollops of putty, right? Like, there's not a whole lot to those. But I don't endorse the eating of porgs. They're far too adorable. You will have to go about that yourself. Trim that up just a little bit. And then trim this down here a little bit more too, so we have a nice line going into that shoulder pad. Okay. So what I do need to find is the other arm bit that connects to this weapon. This looks like the ticket. Nice thing about a lot of these arms is they have like a little shoulder pad kind of built into them, so that's gonna it's gonna help with the transition into these other parts, just by making something to kind of cover up some joins and things. So looking at that, I'm gonna have to trim this down a little bit here on the back side. So I'm gonna trim down this extra little bit of the ammo belt so it'll fit a little better. And on the front of this ammo belt as well, he's got a little piece of fur here that's making that join not great. Just kind of cut away at that a little bit. Port Commander coming to Legion. Man, that would be something else. Porgs and Ewoks, all sorts of things. All the adorable creatures of Star Wars. How could you possibly fight them? I would succumb to their cuteness. All right. How to sculpt a Yoda riding on Chewie's back. Yeah. Wait till next week. You'll see something cool about in regards to that. Yeah, so next week we're going to dive pretty deep into to Yoda and the Wookiee Warriors, so we're going to have lots of stuff to talk about and reveal there. It'll be very cool. Okay, so back to the task at hand. This fellow is going to need some work to get all this stuff to fit in there right. So we can start here like we did last time. I got these two hard plastic parts. I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of plastic glue here and let that set up a little bit. And it's going to still just make something kind of flexible that I can then modify and adjust to fit the rest of the conversion. So I'll hold those two parts together so it just kind of makes, and this is typically how I like to do this kind of three-part assembly thing is battle droids have it a lot, and you know, people often ask about that. It's taking the arm and connecting it to the gun where it's going to connect here, and then just setting that part aside to dry, and then you have the two arms that go there, and then once that part dries, then it's much easier to then just put that over top of the shoulder joints as well. So I just find that it's a lot easier than trying to line up one arm and get the other arm to also fit into the sides of the torso. Just make the connection where, you know, the two arms are going to meet together first, and then you can modify it to then fit into the torso better. Okay, so this guy has got something going on like this. That other arm is going to have to go back a decent amount. I think I'm just going to have to sculpt a lot of that stuff. Oops. So let's talk a little bit about pinning, and we can get into some of that stuff. So this miniature's got like a nice flat section in here where I can apply that. So I'm going to use my pin vise here, which is a little hand drill. I like to use these as opposed to something, you know, electric, because it's a lot more controlled. So you essentially like push it with the bottom of your hand and then turn this with your fingers to actually do the drilling part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and angle this in here and about the angle that I anticipate it's going to be at, and drill a hole in here to glue a paper clip onto. And I could probably hunt through all these parts and find, like, you know, a suitable upper Wookiee arm that's already got a bunch of fur sculpted on it. But for the sake of showing you all, you know, some sculpting basics, I'll go ahead and go about it this way. Okay. And I'm going to take a paper clip, like so, and I'm just going to glue it into that hole like that. I'll draw that a little bit deeper, I think, just to make sure that I got a nice, good, secure point. And then again, I have to use super glue here because of soft plastic and metal. Plastic glue will not work. I'll go ahead and glue that in there. Now I'm just going to let that dry for a little while. I want to set him aside with his paperclip arm for right now. We'll come back to that one. All right, so let's do a little bit of green stuff work. We'll go in here and start to fill in some of these gaps on the other miniatures. So I'm going to take equal parts of the blue and the red. Sometimes this stuff comes in a strip, but I buy it in bulk because I do a fair amount of sculpting. And I'm going to just peel off, I don't know, something a little smaller than a pea off of each color. Two roughly equal size, a little bit more blue. And there, you can certainly mix these in different ratios, and it produces different effects. Sometimes I think more blue makes it take longer to dry. More yellow makes it softer. Something you can kind of experiment with, but I usually just kind of go 50-50. And then what I do to make sure that I get it to mix up really well is I mash the two bits together, and then I just roll it up to make sure that, you know, both sides are touched together as much as possible. And then you just want to keep mixing it until it is a nice, flat, even green color. And when you first start to work with this stuff, it's going to be really soft, really squishy. It'll start to set up after about 20 minutes or maybe a half an hour and give you a little bit more resistance. So what I typically do is I kind of map in the rough shape, let it sit for about another 20 minutes, which we probably won't have time for today. We only got about 15 left in the stream. And then I'll go back in and modify and adjust it. So in addition to standard sculpting tools to shape all this stuff, other useful bits that you might want to consider if you are serious about sculpting are these silicone tipped sculpting tools. These are usually called rubber brushes or color shapers. They're made by a number of different manufacturers. They come in different hardnesses and resistances there, and then a lot of different sizes. But what's great about them is that they won't stick to the material at all. You can use a little bit of water in conjunction with them and really smooth out the surfaces to get a nice, clean, and smooth out surface over top of what you're working on. Oh, you're making Clippy jokes. I get those. I'm old enough to appreciate the Clippy. Any chance we can see the 4-speed card from Yoda? I don't have that pulled up and ready to bring up to show everybody, but next week you're gonna see it. You just have to be patient, y'all. It is a good one though. I do like the 4-speed quite a bit. Okay, so now I'm just gonna pull off a little bit here. I think, a little bit kind of less is more. You can certainly kind of build this stuff up in layers, should you so choose. But I'm going to go ahead and just put some right over the top of this join that we have here. And then while I'm at it, I'm also going to put a little bit over here to just fill in some of these joins back in this section here. And I think it's important first to kind of just mash it in there. Don't worry if you get a little bit of fingerprints or whatever on there. We're going to smooth all that stuff out. So now when it comes to actually sculpting the fur texture, what I like to do is I like to use something kind of blade shape. So I've got the sculpting tool that comes to a point. You could use an X-Acto blade or something similar if you wanted to, but it needs to have kind of like a sharp point to it. And you want to just create some triangles first. Like start at the bottom and then just make triangles by indenting this way and then indenting this way. And then over top of that, almost like shingles you want to think about, try to stagger the next layer as you go above those, like this, and then also like this. So you're starting to make this kind of shingled pattern underneath and starting at the bottom and going above will help it kind of overlap over top of itself. So you can see I've kind of put in a triangle here, and now I've gone up above that, and now the point of this triangle meets in between the other two. So what I need to do here is now a triangle that's going to go here, and here, and here, and there. So that's the start. And then I can also, spend a little bit of time here mashing this down up on the top portion of it as well to get it to fit back in and around this arm. So now that we've got that kind of like roughly shaped out, I'm going to go ahead and utilize one of these sculpting tools because it's nice and soft. And I think one with a little bit of a bladed edge, like this one, I think is going to be nice. So this has got kind of like a blade right there that you can see. And you want to have a little bit of water handy. So I just have like a cup of water over here off to the side. Now you just want to use that tool to kind of pull and push some of these little bits around a little bit. And I've got a generous amount of water over top of it just to kind of keep the whole area nice and wet, so my sculpting tool won't stick to it very much. And at this point, you want to take your sculpting tool and then at the bottom underneath of each one of these tips, for example. So you see like right here, just push in like a little indentation there. That's going to just help drive home the layers a little bit better as you go. And then you can just kind of pull these little bits around in different directions to kind of make it flow a little bit better. So it doesn't look exactly like a shingled roof as it goes over top, but it starts to get a little bit more organic and starts to match some of the texture that's around it. And then, the next step is essentially to use the sculpting tool to just, with a light pressure, and this is where it's really advantageous that it's flexy, it has some give to it. You can use that to kind of go in and you can sculpt out and smooth out some of these areas here. Make sure that you have like a nice cool texture that blends in really well to the surrounding area. And you might find that if you have an extensive amount of sculpting that you're doing, you might want to attach the miniature to something that you can hold on to securely, because if you're constantly holding on to it, what's probably going to happen is you're going to forget that you have green stuff on the backside and you're just going to put your finger right into it. So try to like hold it in a place where you're not going to hit any of the other detail anywhere, or attach the miniature to a base like I've done here, or even just attach it to like a cork or something like that to ensure that you can keep your hands free from the green stuff and you won't mess up any of the work that you spent time doing. And then you can just like take your edge sculpting tool here, and you can just pull out a couple of these little bits to make more organic shapes. It's just kind of going back and forth. Now I would probably let this set up for about another half an hour before I start to do that final smoothing pass over top of it. So I'm not really gonna, because it's still so soft right now, it doesn't give me a lot of resistance to kind of keep the forms, and it kind of mashes things in pretty well. So this is just a word to the wise in general. Like, you're going to find that, you know, the sculpting and final smoothing and shaping of all these textures is going to be a little bit easier after this is set up about 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I got a couple little spots in here that I'll probably smooth out later, but we'll move on to the next part here. So we've got this section back in the back. So again, I'm just going to do it the same way I did it before. So we're going to do some triangles here on the bottom part. So I'm going to add a little bit more green stuff here so I can just get a little bit more. It's really thin in that spot on the bottom, and I'm not getting a whole lot of indentation there. So a little bit more there. I'm going to pull it back away from this detail a little bit, the side of my sculpting tool, so it's not going to obscure the bandolier too much. And it's going to be important that you kind of keep either water. You could also use something like Vaseline if you really wanted to keep the tools from sticking to the surface. We're just going to do some little triangles here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that one out. And now I'll go above, and we'll do the triangle so that their points kind of meet in a different direction there. And this is a technique you might just want to practice a little bit, you know, like it's going to take a little bit of time to like understand how the putty works and how it reacts, like how it reacts over time and becomes more rigid and more easy to work with. Yeah, just get a little bit of green stuff, throw it down on some plastic card, practice your textures until you get to a point where you feel confident enough that you can apply it to some miniatures. Another one up here. Okay, so that's, it's kind of rough and really kind of heavily textured here. So I'm gonna now use my color shaper here, this silicone tipped brush, to kind of smooth out the channels first over top of everything, and then I'll go back in with a point and kind of push in those indentations a little bit on the upper side too. Are you asking, Canadian Boys One, are you asking where I got this in particular? I got this from my local game store, but they carry a lot of specialized tools. You can definitely find these at arts and crafts stores. They're usually in the painting section. I think that painters often use these to like remove and push paint around on the canvas. They're usually called color shapers, or they're called rubber brushes, I think. So if you did a search online at your local store, I don't know if you're in the US or not. In the US, it'd be a store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby or something like that. Okay. Ooh, we're almost out of time, so I'd like to spend some more time covering some of these sculpting techniques. Maybe we'll do that in a dedicated stream in the future, but for now, I wanted to spend the last 5 minutes of the stream to talk about the My Star Wars Legion winners that we had in May and show off some really cool community work. So let's go ahead and do that. So this kind of shows the current fur pattern that I have going on here. I think I definitely need to add a little bit more variation. I think it looks a little bit better here on the front side. You can kind of see how it's sweeping around in some different directions. It kind of smooths out. It obviously doesn't look too integrated right now because it's a vastly different color, but yeah, it's a quick and dirty fur tutorial for you all. So let's take a look at some cool minis. How about that? All right. So in the month of May, we were talking all about core units. And this example from Mr. New Sprig 51, I think that's what that username is. It's got some amazing basing going on. I really like what's happening with these like little plastic, or maybe those are brass etched ferns. Lots of extra vegetation, those little toadstools, and variation in the color. And on top of that, just the paint job on the clones. Like every clone is a little unique. They have a lot of personalized marking, great battle damage in general. Just like an amazing unit of clones with a lot of tabletop presence with those really cool bases. Definitely like that stuff quite a bit. Very, very cool. All right. Next up, we have got more clones, this time in the 501st. Is it the 501st? Can't remember. Whatever Ahsoka Tano's Legion was. I think it actually was the 501st. But there was in the season 7 of the Clone Wars, there's this really cool scene where Ahsoka kind of comes back, and all the clones that were previously under her command have painted their helmets very similar to her the markings that she has on her skin. And I think that this is a great example of that. I've seen a few other ones online, but you know, this unit looks so cool and cohesive together. The color scheme in general is great, and the execution on the markings on the helmets just looks awesome. Looks very, very cool. So well done, Battle Dwarf painting. This is the culmination of a bunch of really cool submissions that Brio Brush was doing over the course of our Gathering Forces stream that we did in the month of May, where Dallas, Will, Michael, and myself all painted up new Star Wars Legion forces over the month of May. And Brio Brush was steadily contributing awesome Rebel troopers with every week, so was often featured. But this kind of shows the full squad, which just super tight and very clean painting. I mean, look at all those highlights on the weapon. You know, they could have easily cut some corners, but the paint jobs there are super sharp, and I think those are some of the finer Rebel troopers I think I've ever seen. So very, very cool. Super nice. Next up, we've got these from Tomicho. I love the color scheme here. I love the contrast on the bases. The bases even seem to have this like really subtle gradient where they're like it's a little bit brighter orange towards the front. The black base rim just pops everything up a lot, and then they selected blue as a great complementary color to that orange base. You know, that kind of Geonosian kind of soil that they have. The tan color is very clean, very nice. Just like really, really cool color scheme. They kind of have that that kind of those unique markings that you saw in episode 1 at the very beginning, where the battle droids are kind of escorting people on Naboo. And yeah, I really like the color scheme. I just think it's a really cool way to see droids, and just like a unique, subtle tweak to the regular color scheme just really makes them pop and makes them really stand out in a cool way. Snowtroopers, one of my favorite units of all time, for sure. The bases here are great. I mean, I think that the thing that I love about these as well is that they've also spent a little bit of time to put some snow like up on their gear, on their helmets. There's like these little tufts of bits here and there on their clothing and equipment. They just look really immersed in their environment, and they look like they've been slogging through the Arctic in pursuit of rebel forces for, you know, what seems to be weeks, and they just look so weathered and really cool. I love the subtle variations in the kind of cream colors and like the more cool whites that they have. It's a very limited palette, but everything is very distinct, and all the components on the miniatures really stand out in a great way. So well done, Black Sun painting. And here we've got some more entries from Grand Papa Nurgle, a very prolific painter that posts a lot of stuff on Instagram. Really, really cool. Love the color markings on these B2s. The inverse squad leader is just a great touch that really makes it stand out for both you and your opponent to be able to discern who's leading the squad. And those bases are wild. They're just really cool. I think they found like some manufacturer that make kind of alien style grass tufts. I've seen these kind of bright colorations before. Be great for bases set on Felucia or Umbara, something like that, if you're really trying to get that vibe. But in contrast, they added some snow to it, which is something I haven't really seen before. So that kind of combination of the white plus those extra bits just really adds a lot of visual interest and really cool a cool overall effect, I think, for the unit. They've posted some pictures of their entire forces, like their whole armies, and it just looks awesome on the tabletop. Really makes them pop. Really makes them unique. I'd love to see some terrain that would match those bases. I bet that'd be pretty wild. Cool, and I think that will close out our Star Wars Legion picks for the month of May. Just as a reminder, we're going to be going over all of the picks for June. The theme for June was heavy units, so get your vehicles painted. You still have a few more days left to get those in. We'll tabulate all those and get them all together. The month of July is going to be all about special forces, so if you are hot to paint some Wookiees and want to do some of that stuff, that would fit in perfectly. ARC Troopers, BX, battle droids, you could do Mandalorians, all the really, really cool, awesome units in Star Wars. It's a great opportunity for you to get some paint on those and show them off to the community and get some kudos for it all. Yeah, you can always go back, Hurricane Curl, and you can tag your older posts. They'll get added to the feed in general, and they'll help us kind of select and go back and select some winners. So don't be afraid to go back to old posts and update your hashtags that you have in there. Cool. Well, I think that will sum up today's stream. Thanks. It was a little bit of an unconventional one. I just wanted to spend some time talking about Wookiees and how cool they are. Show you some of my current projects and stuff that I'm working on as far as taking those older Wookiee warrior frames and our products and updating them. I will probably show off these in a future stream. I'm definitely going to be coming back and painting a lot of these, so make sure to come back and check us next week for some updates. If you're interested in Wookiees, going to have a ton of social media reveals over the course of next week for both the Wookiee warriors and for Yoda as well. So thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, take care. Have a great weekend.